Jeff has been instrumental for me taking the next step in my career and starting my own business. He actually coached me and helped me to see a lot of things about myself, some of the things that were really holding me back and helping me get through some of that so that I can just step out there, be more authentic with who I am and just go after my dreams. So I thought it would be ideal to have him come on this month, since it's the beginning of the year and we're all kind of thinking through, how do we become better people? How do I lead my team better? So Jeff is going to walk us through coaching in the workplace. And before I hand it over to Jeff, just one more thing. We're going to have, I'll probably announce it on Friday. We're going to have a giveaway. Jeff is going to do an ELI assessment as well as a coaching session after that. To whoever attended this call today, you all have an opportunity to win a chance to have a coaching session with Jeff. So that will be announced on Friday. All right. So Jeff, I'm going to pass it on to you. 1 second.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Xavier. And I'm thankful for the opportunity and for to see you being successful, because I was early in my coaching career when you and I were working together, and I was afraid that I had pushed you in the wrong direction, which is which, when you think about coaching, is the exact wrong mindset. It's not about you, it's about your clients. And so I'm really honored to be here and to follow my friend and colleague, Jack. We used to work together, and I'm happy to see him also moving on in his career and going after some things that he's wanted to do for a while. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I know the second week of the year is also a busy time, people coming back from holidays and maybe some illness, and time is precious. So let's get started. See if I can navigate. So just to frame up our conversation today, I wanted to talk about coaching in 3 different ways. I'll start off with some definitions, some diagrams to say what is coaching and then what is not coaching. Then I want to spend some time talking about what is it like to receive coaching? Who comes to me for coaching? What is the coaching experience like? Or what are some of the foundations that we target? Xavier mentioned the ELI assessment. That is sort of a foundational level to understand people's baseline energy. And then I want to talk a little bit about providing coaching. Not everyone needs to go through a lengthy coaching certification program to exhibit some of the coaching mindset and some of the things you can do. So I'll provide 3 or 4 examples of things you can put into your tool belt, whether you are an organizational leader, project leader, agile, Scrum team leader. There'll just be some things I want you to be able to walk away with. Let me start with an introduction of a little bit of myself and then kind of how I got into coaching. So I spent 26, 27 years in the consulting world, working for Accenture and Ernst & Young. And before I moved on to my next job that I'm currently in. And for those of you in consulting or have been in and around it or work with consultants, our goals or our performance is measured on 3 things. Typically how much work you can sell or be a part of selling, how much work you can deliver, or in my case, I was project lead, PMO lead, delivery lead, engagement lead. So you're measured on how much you can sell and how much you can deliver at margin. And then the third piece is leadership, or people leader, or career counselor. And when you're working for a large partnership, large publicly traded partnership, needless to say that selling work and delivering work and meeting our clients' expectation is very, very high. And not to say that people leadership wasn't as important, but it was a little bit, you could have mediocre leaders, but if they were selling and delivering, that was what they were rewarded for, or what they were promoted for. And so I lived in that environment for a long time, but I was always drawn more to the people leader side. And it's a little bit challenging in consulting because you have a team for 6 weeks or 6 months or 2 years, but they're not always yours, and it's very fluid. And I wanted to move into an organization where I would have a dedicated team where I could be a part of their career growth from entry level, through whatever they wanted to do. And along that journey, I had a coach at EY. We had a team that was going through we had a coach come in and help us with some things. And I talked to her, I said, what's this all about? And, she said, oh, I went through this program, whatever. I looked into it. At the time, I had 2 kids in college, and I was like, the last thing I need to do is another tuition bill and time away from my family. So I delayed it. And then, came back to it a few years later when my kids were out of school, and decided I want to go through it. And I went into it thinking, okay, I've been coaching my whole life. I've been leading teams, leading people, providing people with career counseling. I'm just going to get the certification. But what the program really was is about, you as a person. You basically go through all of the same things that we coach our clients on as a sort of a client, to understand yourself and to understand what's blocking you and what needs to be released so you can move forward. Fast forward to about 2018, 2019, I was reading this book by Jerry Kalana, just amazing book. And right there in the introduction, he said, there's better humans make better leaders. And in the process of learning to lead well, we can become better humans. And I was like, this is what I've experienced my whole life, that I wasn't the driving leader. I wasn't the punitive leader. I was probably everyone's friend first and trying to get them to like me. But what this gave me the permission to do was just to be a human leader. And then, so that kind of set the stage for me moving into doing some coaching. And also as I lead, my team now, I've got, I think 70 employees and 25, 30 consultants that I work with. And, my approach is to treat them like adults, treat them like humans, and not feel like I have to lead them or set extreme boundaries that I can't be a human for fear that they might take advantage of me or they might know of my weaknesses. So this is just a way to launch into this, but also if you're a reader or a podcast listener, go look up Jerry Kalana. You won't be disappointed. So let me move through this. So I wanted to start a little bit with a definition of coaching. And, again, I went into this thinking I've been a coach for years. I got this, right? And one of the things that we like to get a little bit clear on is what is a coach, what is it not? Most people associate coach with sports, athletic coaches, and there are some similarities. And I'll say that the similarity is, an athletic coach never steps on the field and performs, right? But that coach and that athlete almost always have the same goal. It's winning. It's winning the Super Bowl, winning an Olympic gold medal, and that's where it differs. My goals as a coach are not yours. I'm there to help you find those and achieve those, but they're not mine. And so it differs a little bit even from athletic coaching, where the word is actually in the title. Some other things it's not is, and this was a challenge for me, it's not consulting. You are not a consultant. Coming from 27 years of doing that, where every hour that I'm billing my client, I have to be providing value. And I struggle with this at first, which is this hour has to be the most important hour that they've ever had so that they see value in me as their coach. When really it's reversed. The value is, there's an hour-long conversation. The value is the minute that stops through the week, through the month, until the next session. And so in consulting, there's a big focus on defining, assessing, and improving a situation, an organization, a process. Coaching is about the person. Now, coaching can be done in an organization or a team where you are working on several people. And yes, it could be improving a situation, but it's people-centric. It starts with people. Coaching and mentoring gets used, unilaterally. Even my organization, we say things like, we need to set up a coaching mentoring program. There are some similarities, but the main difference is when I'm mentoring somebody, somebody on my team, I'm saying, follow me. If you want to do these things, you need to understand all that I've done, and then you can go on and do the same thing. A coach says, follow you, right? This is, one of the things I find when I'm working with somebody is, they come to the situation, say, hey, I want to be promoted. I want to get this top rating. I want to be the project lead for this thing. And you have to unpack and say, is that really your goal, or is that an external goal? And that kind of comes back to this tagline I've got there. As a coach, it helps you find clarity from within. It's not helping you align to someone else's strategy. It's your strategy. Helps you overcome those challenges and, accomplish more. A coach is not a friend. Again, this is an easy trap for me. That's kind of my tendency, is to, kind of support and encourage people. But as a coach, you have to draw that line and sometimes ask difficult questions that a friend, a spouse, whatever, may not be able to ask because they're emotionally connected to you. And so, there's a distinction there. Friends are great in the coaching process. You need someone that you can say, I need to be accountable, and every 2 weeks, I'm going to tell you the progress I'm making towards my goals. But coaching friends, not quite the same thing. And then last and most importantly, probably, is coaching is not therapy. And this is, and I'm painting with very broad strokes here, but a therapist tends to focus on healing the past. A coach wants to bring awareness to the present so that we can unlock your future direction. Now, I've got a slide here next. It's a little bit more of a diagram. This is debated in the coaching circles quite a bit, is everybody comes to a coaching session with some baggage. And we are not trained to deal with serious traumas, childhood traumas, sexual traumas, illnesses, things like that. So we're not necessarily trained to take you all the way back into the root of those things. But before you can move forward, this is a little bit more my personal coaching approach. You have to understand what's holding you back. And that does require reflection and looking back at some of those things that are holding you back. So basic definition, let me move on to a little bit of a diagram, and this will kind of hopefully bring to light what I was trying to say. So in this infinite loop of, we're in the present moment, but, we're rarely there. We're always thinking about the future. We're always thinking about something that happened in the past, whether it's the immediate past, whether it's our childhood, whether it's a bad relationship in the past. And if coaching is about unlocking and moving you forward, again, my view is you have to do a little bit of reflection and looking in the back. And for me, this is captured very well in Kierkegaard's quote that life can only be understood backwards, but lived forward. And, and you can dive into all the psychologists and go back to your Psych 101 classes. This is a very common thing. Jung would say that the greatest burden of a child is the unlived life of a parent. And we have to be accountable to that. We can't just ignore that, because we'll continue to stub our toe. The so-called midlife crisis is usually what they find is at ages 35, if you don't, you stub your toe on these things that you've been dealing with your whole life that you kind of push aside. And I need a career change. I need something different. I'm not happy. Or at 50, I've done this for 30 years. I need something different. My view as a coach and the studying that I've done is that you have to spend a little bit of time in the past addressing and what I call these GAILS. So this diagram is basically, in order to move forward, you're going to hit these roadblocks. Something is keeping you from moving forward. Could be big or little, right? You have to reflect a little bit on you have to go into your baggage. You have to unpack that a little bit, and just the simple process of turning to face our past, our fears, whatever, begins to unlock us. And if you've ever read a book or seen a movie, turning and facing the demon is like the key point in most of these things. Gandalf turns and faces the dragon, and it almost kills him, but he emerges, victorious. So now I want, this is sort of the diagram. So I wanted to kind of use this to clarify the difference between therapy and coaching and some other things. I will say we are also trained in identifying when someone might need both. Again, not a professional assessment, but just, hey, some of the things you're dealing with are beyond what I can help you with. Have you considered coaching? And then, we have a kind of a referral process through that. So next, I want to move on to a little bit of, that's the definition of coaching. Now I want to talk about receiving coaching. Who comes to me for coaching? Who, as you're working in your teams or working individually as a consultant, where are there opportunities for coaching, and what does it look like, right? I mean, I think there's some mysterious thoughts that it's, Jerry Kalana is the CEO whisperer, and it really comes down to a couple of, I would say, tactical things and some hard work on both parts. So I put this quote in here. Sorry for those of you who are younger than me, but being a child or my teenage years in the 80s, I'm still going to drop a few 80s quotes in here. But this is the great line from the Talking Heads. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself living in a beautiful house, a beautiful wife, and you say, well, how did I get here? And the reason I put this in here is to say that most of what I encounter as a coach, as my own personal life, friends, family, is, we go through life and, we're doing things, sometimes unconscious, right? And then all of a sudden we have these moments of epiphany and say, this isn't really what I wanted to do, or I've done this, I've mastered this, I kind of want to do something different, but I don't know how, or I feel the pressure of, I can't change careers, or I can't take a step back, or I can't take a sabbatical and gather my thoughts. And so that sort of how did I get here, or is to me is one of those moments, one of many that people say, hey, might need some coaching, or as an organization, we got a little bit lost. We were a small startup, and we made some progress, and now we're ready to take that next step, but we're still a little bit stuck. So let me talk about what some of the two main principles of coaching. And so energy is, and people, hopefully, some people have a reaction to energy, and they think this is going to get mystical. We're going to talk about crystals and essential oils. And while there is tons of merit to that, this is a little bit simpler than that. This is how we show up. That's the most basic way I can say that. And what it really is our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and our actions. The diagram I put here on the left, we could spend days, weeks unpacking this. It's a model, and I put that there to say that this model is the foundation. And so, as Xavier said, we're going to give away 2 or 3 of these ELI assessments. When you go through the ELI assessment, it'll kind of, you answer some questions, it comes out, you get some scores, right? And it says, okay, you spend a lot of time in this level, and then we can unpack that, or you spend a lot of time in this level. And so this is just a model to give you something to say, hey, when you're feeling this way, what action do you feel like taking? Well, I'm lethargic, I don't feel like taking an action. Don't worry too much about the diagram. I broke it down into some simpler things here on the right, these energy levels, these thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so over on the far right, you see these 2 words, catabolic and anabolic. And those are 2 very broad categories to talk about the way we categorize these energy levels. Let me just define those. Catabolic is a tearing down, a destructive. This is, I'm in this constant state of stress, and I have adrenaline and cortisol pumping through me, and I can get a lot done because of that energy. But over time, I feel fatigued, and I get to that point and say, how did I get here? Anabolic energy, if you think of anabolic steroids, while illegal, the root of the word is building up. And so we have different types of energies. And some of these energies are expensive. They wear us down over time. And some of these energies build us up. And so as we think about level energy 1 through energy level 7, and I'll define those, but before you start to look at these and say, oh gosh, I'm always angry, I am that, I want you to look at the quote and just recognize that we have thoughts, feelings, and emotions, but we are not them, okay? And the second thing that I want to draw out is the first of all coaching, the first thing that I look for when I'm working with somebody is awareness, is how can we increase that awareness? Awareness doesn't fix the problem, but it helps you from perpetuating the problem. So awareness of these levels is essential. With that awareness, when I went through this 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I did what everybody did. I opened up my report and I said, oh my gosh, I'm walking around with a really low energy level. And what the scores and things like that really are kind of, at a point in time, you do this a lot. But what you realize with that awareness is we are all constantly just flowing through this. We have a bad morning, we spill coffee on ourselves on our commute in, we're late for our first meeting, and we're in that level 1 victim conflict mode, right? And that may influence us for half an hour, half the day, the whole day, right? Or the whole week. With awareness, what I started to notice is, oh, okay, that was a bad moment. That was just a moment in time. I can move on, and I don't have to be angry about that. I don't have to be in conflict. And so then, when you first go through this, you just notice, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place, which is absolutely normal. But the awareness of yourself moving through that is key. Let me describe these a little bit. Level 1 energy is that victim, that apathy. I'm late for that meeting. Well, I was late for that meeting because I had to get my kid ready for, homeschooling, and I have to do everything for my family, and that's just what it is, right? Conflict is more, someone says, hey, you were late for that meeting and we weren't able to get through all of the schedule review. You really need to make sure you're on time. Well, now you're in conflict. Well, damn it, I had to get my kid ready for homeschooling while this was all going on. And then, there's a level 3 of this responsibility. Oh, okay, well, they're right. I should have been on time. My bad. I'll fix it. I'm going to work 12 hours today, and I'm going to, make lunch for the kid doing homeschooling, and I'm going to check their homework. I got it. I'll do it. Right. And this is sort of a lose-win. Like, everybody else needs to win. I'll take on the burden and I'll lose. Level 4, concern. And now just kind of notice the bar on the right. We're moving from a catabolic, a kind of tearing down, moving into the building up. And also say, it's down here in my text somewhere, none of these are high or low, good or bad. They just are. Level 4, concern, is what you find in a lot of teachers, nurses, bosses, is I need to make sure everybody else is okay. Kids are good, family's good, my team is good. I'm miserable, but that's okay. That's okay. My role here is to not have any boundaries around myself and just make sure everybody else is good. Now, when you move into 5, 6, 7, you start to get into these positive or these building up energies. And this reconciliation is, okay, let me think about this. I have to get the kid ready. True. Maybe I can work with my partner on that and we can share some of those responsibilities. Let me reconcile. Let me, kind of go back to my team, say, hey, my bad, I was late for that meeting. Let me work with my team and say, hey, on these days I might be late. I need to build up somebody so that they can run that meeting. I don't have to be in that meeting. And so you begin to see solutions. And this gets into instead of a lose-win, this gets into more of a win-win. What do I need? What do you need? I don't have to put myself second. I don't have to put myself first. How do we do this together? Level 6, kind of synthesis. This is moving into that thing you do, whether it's at work, home, whatever, where time stops. You're not worried about, schedules. You're not worried about paychecks. You're not worried. You're just in the zone. And, and in some cases, people say, yeah, I have that, but I don't know how to get there, right? And part of this is you may not know how to get there, but when you're there, to live in that moment, enjoy it. Level 7 is kind of, we describe this as a neighborhood that you get to visit, but you don't really live there. This is kind of the visionaries of the world who see everything as possible, all people capable of doing things. Is a great place to be, but it's rare. For a majority of the people, it's rare. For the visionaries of the world, this is where they occupy a lot of time, and there's a reason that there's not many of these people. So obviously not going to make us all intelligent on this today, but I wanted to call this out. And if you go back to the diagram, is in order for you to move forward, you have to at least understand how you show up most of the time, and what could be good, could be bad. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to use those words. You could find yourself in conflict. You could find yourself constantly with concern for others. You could find yourself as, I'm the reconciler. I'm the person they bring into these projects to get, the business and IT to collaborate better. Those are all fine. But when you're in that victim and that conflict, then we can talk about, what's driving that, and how do we remove that roadblock so you can move forward. That gets us into GAILS, which I had in the diagram before. And these are what we call energy blocks. And this is that big red X I had on that diagram back there. And this is an acronym for gremlins, assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. Let's just walk through these. A gremlin is that inner voice we all have that just says, you're not enough. You're not very good at that. I got some examples here. This executive sponsor on this project I'm leading kind of reminds me of my high school coach. I was just never, I was a better athlete than so-and-so, but I never got put in. And, I'm not going to be successful here. I'm just not good enough. Right. And that gremlin, when I say we all have them, and some, I've worked with people and they said, but that's my motivator. And that is absolutely true. But for how long and at what cost? And so I'll say again, I've gone through this, my own set of coaching and counseling and therapy, and my gremlin drove me for 27 years of consulting. I was very successful. But at the end of that 27 years, I was exhausted, right? And it was because I had, I'll give you a little brief background. I was an English major in high school. Or in college. I knew nothing about corporate world, consulting world. Luckily, I found a consulting company whose motto was to take, people who could think on their feet and give them years and years and years of training. But the whole time I was in that world, I was like, I know more about Shakespeare than I do about SAP implementations. What am I doing here? That fear that I was going to be called out as an imposter drove me to be successful. And so people are like, well, if I let go of my gremlin, what's going to happen? And, I'm here to tell you this. Xavier's been through it. Many people on this call maybe been through it. Is turning and facing that gremlin, like the dragon in the dungeon, isn't as scary as we think it is. Okay, assumptions. This is the typical, something happened in the past, therefore it's always going to happen that way. I didn't get that last promotion. I'm not even going to apply for this one. It's not going to happen. The classic example I give here is the Michael Jordan example. He didn't make his freshman basketball team. He could have said, well, if I can't make the freshman team, I'm not going to make the JV and varsity team. Instead, well, he did grow 6 inches between his freshman and sophomore year, but he went on to be the greatest basketball player ever. If he had made an assumption that because he didn't make that team, he wasn't going to succeed, you know, we would have all missed out on some great years. So these assumptions are, you know, this happened, therefore I'm not even going to do something. I'm not going to try. Interpretations, this is stories, opinions, judgments that you've heard about yourself or certain events of your life, and you take that, while maybe true, small t true, you take that to be the truth. And if you've, you know, listened to anything from Brené Brown the last 10 years or so, this is what she calls the stories we tell ourselves, right? Someone said something. We've all been in a meeting, you know, all on a conference call. We're all in a meeting. And after the meeting, someone, you know, sends you a message or they see you in the hallway, like, did you hear what that person said? You know, and you're like, no. They asked me this, and they, you know, and how could they possibly do that? And I must not be very good at my job if I wasn't able to answer that question. And I heard the question and I saw the meeting. I thought it was a pretty good meeting. Well, as it turns out, like I said, person was late in the morning, spilled coffee on themselves. They approached that meeting with, you know, conflict or victimhood, or they have some other fear that's going on that says everything that happens is kind of filtered through this lens. So, and then limiting beliefs. These are generalizations, stereotypes, ideas that we accept about ourselves. And this, I'll give you this example. And this happens a lot, right? And good intentioned things turn out to be, you know, way that we kind of believe them to be true, tend to block us. And I'll give you a quick example. I was a shy kid, mumbled quite a bit, you know, and then you get to high school and you take that test, at least they did back in the 80s. You know, what should you do? Should you focus on this, this, and this? And I took it. My mother said, my mother, who was just fantastic, understood her children really well. She said, I don't care what that test says. Whatever you do, don't do public speaking, you mumble. I was like, okay, that is truth. Okay, so I'll never do that. Well, at the same time, I wanted to be a teacher. And to be a teacher, I would have to do public speaking. And I never really even tried it because I thought, okay, well, I come from a long line of not public speakers. I must not be a public speaker. And then I moved into my career and was, you know, forced to speak publicly, but then found that I liked it. And I thought I was pretty good at it. And then I was asked to speak in the community or speak in my church. And lo and behold, here I am speaking to you. And public speaking is actually one of the things I enjoy the most. And I think I do really well. So we all have those, right? If I hadn't stopped and paused and worked through that, I would probably miss out on this career opportunity that I have launched a couple of years ago. So again, quote at the bottom, and there's quotes all throughout this. I'm not going to drain them, but they're there just to give you a little seed to think about this. The whole idea about these GAILS is that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. I have these filters that block us from moving forward. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about providing coaching. I'm just checking time. So as I said, a coaching mindset is something, and Xavier's probably around. We did this with our organization a couple of years ago. Was again, we had a lot of people leaders who were new to leading teams or leading, being responsible for someone's career growth and doing all of the evaluations and giving difficult feedback and all of that stuff. So we did this coaching mindset, and it was, we weren't going to make 40 people coaches. We weren't going to put them through that program, but we wanted to give them some tools. And the key here is one of our foundation principles at IPEC is that each person we meet is a teacher and a student. And so you have the opportunity to both, receive coaching, but you also, in whatever position you're in, it doesn't have to be a leadership position. As I said, it could be your project team. It could be your Scrum team. It could be an organization, but you all have opportunities where you're going to be in front of folks and have an opportunity to coach. So I'm gonna give you a couple of basics. the number one basic that they teach us and drill into us to the point of, I'll say, annoyance, because literally when we were going through hours and hours and hours of simulated coaching, we would have a coach listening to us. And if I was being the pseudo coach, they would literally tap you on the shoulder and say, you're stacking questions, you're probing, you should have acknowledged and validated. Acknowledge and validation is probably the number one thing you can do. And so let me describe what this is. Acknowledging is kind of mirroring back or rephrasing what, and I put employee in here, but anytime you see employee, you can exchange that for team member, whatever your context is. But this is a way to mirror back what the employee said. And it starts with something like, and what you're saying is, or so when that happens in the meeting, you feel, and you kind of feed that back to them. I will tell you that, and for those of you kind of rolling your eyes right now, when I was taught this, I almost had a physical gag reaction was, oh my God, we're just kind of BSing people. Like, we're just saying, oh, hey, you're really smart. And it took me a while, and we're going to go through an example to kind of distinguish between just kind of, I would say almost pretending to listen, like, oh, okay, that was frustrating. And meanwhile, you're working on something else or you're on your phone. So as I describe this, and it sounds pretty basic, it may also give you a little bit of reaction of, like, that's just not going to work. That's just not who I am. So the first part is acknowledging, right? The second part is validating. And the trouble here that I had, and others have, and you may have as a coach, is when you're validating, you're not judging, and you're not saying that what they are feeling is right or wrong. You may not agree with them. All you're trying to do is bring them back down to some level of normalization so that they aren't fighting with themselves, and then you can move them on. The one thing I'll say here, again, this was pounded into us, and it's a normal human reaction. And so even though I said I believe in human leadership, is the tendency for us to say, I understand, right? And you'll see it, and you've probably seen it, but the minute you say you understand, sometimes you get a little puzzled look like, no, you don't. You don't know what it's like to get the kids ready for home learning, and I got to get this presentation together. So we always say, never ever, triple never say I understand. We don't. We can only validate what they feel. So the way this works is, oh, so what you're saying is, and then after they say, yeah, and it's really frustrating, then you can say, yeah, I mean, you have every right to feel that way. And we'll give you an example here of, like, then this is the opportunity to be genuine. This next step that I'll show you in the example is this moves us from just kind of, BSing people to really getting, to building a connection with them and then freeing them up to move on. So let me give you an example. There's a 3-step process. You acknowledge what was said, you validate the feeling, and you normalize the situation. So employee comes to you, and I'll give you an example here. This is real life example. Employee comes to you, I keep trying to get my metrics up, and no matter what I do, I never hit the target. And then, I get this, I get a mediocre raise, and, I really need extra money. And, they have this tale, and next thing you know, they're living in a van down by the river. And as a coach, the validate or the acknowledging part is you play it back to them. So what you're saying is you're putting in a lot of effort, but you're not getting the results you want. Employee, yeah, well, it's really frustrating. I mean, like, they set these standards for us, they're unattainable, and and so then this validation piece, while not agreeing with them, not saying that, not making a judgment. If you know your folks, if you've been listening, this is where you can make, this is the payoff. So, depending on that person, this is an example. Well, of course, based on the high value that you put on personal performance and your personal brand, right? So now I'm not just blowing smoke up their ass. Now I am saying, okay, I know you. I know that if I set a goal for you, you're going to achieve it. I know how much, maybe I know a little bit about their personal life. I know how much you value being a provider for your family, right? This is where you can plug in your past relationship with them and show them that you're engaged, right? So you say, okay, I know you, and based on the value that you put on meeting those expectations, and then you move into normalize the situation. It's only natural that you would be frustrated, right? And the blue boxes I've got along the bottom is really kind of highlighting, what you're sending back to that person. So the first one is they feel heard, right? Second piece is, I feel understood. I think we're on the same page. And then this third piece is bringing them back to, they're upset, they're excited, they're frustrated. Now you bring them back and they say, okay, well, what I'm feeling then, okay, that's okay. I'm entitled to feel that way. Now, that's not the end, right? That is the point of kind of bringing them back to, from fighting with themselves. Now they're ready for coaching, right? And I don't mean this in a capital C, but now they're ready for, okay, now we can unpack this a little bit. Well, tell me what you're doing, why do you think this is happening, et cetera. That leads to probably the second, probably biggest thing you can do, and probably the simplest thing you can do, which is asking empowering questions, right? So empowering questions, cause a person to reflect and think, not simply just answer, right? And you've probably seen this 1,000 times, probably seen it on social media. You go, oh yeah, I shouldn't ask those kinds of questions. Your closed-end questions, kind of your left brain types of questions, you're going to ask a closed-end question, you're going to get a closed-end answer. Yep, no, maybe, right? The open-end questions lead somewhere. So the closed-end questions have. So okay, let's take the other example. I'm not hitting my metrics. I'm afraid I'm not going to get a good rating, right? Well, have you tried, looking at some of the training out there about that? Yep, didn't work. Okay, well, was it effective? Nope, didn't work. Could you possibly reach out to a peer and get some training from them? Yeah, everyone's too busy, not going to do that. So then you're, as a coach, this is a terrifying place to be, because you're like, I'm getting one-word answers. We're not having a conversation. We're not unpacking. We're not turning back to say, what is really at the root of this so we can move forward? The open-ended questions, who, what, where, when, how, and there's hundreds of these, tell me about, et cetera. We put why in there. You have to be careful with this one, or if you've got a pretty good relationship with someone, the why can be, helpful. But it at times, if you're not careful, it comes across a little bit of confrontational. Well, why didn't you do that, right? And puts people back on their heels, and you get into some trouble. So these open-ended questions, what you want to do, similar to the acknowledging, validating, is to have them talk, right? And then as they begin to answer these questions, right? So if we play out that example, well, who can you tell me who is telling you that you're not hitting your performance metrics? Well, yeah, the IT lead, doesn't like the schedule, and therefore, I have to redo it, and the schedule's not due on time, and so then, in that sentence, rather than getting a one-word answer, you've got opportunities to ask additional questions. Well, what could you possibly do? Where might you seek help? And it's the same kind of question, but you're just giving them an opportunity to speak. And again, getting more rich material that, you as a supervisor or as a coach can say, okay, let's dig into that one. And what you'll find is there's a Gail there. There's some gremlin that's telling them that they're not enough, or that there's a limiting belief that they're just never really meant for this type of thing. And so between acknowledging and validating, and then asking open-ended questions, just provides an opportunity. And these don't solve the problems, and that's probably the bad side about these tips I'm giving you, is these are good tools to have, but then you have to move into, you have to kind of put your coaching cap on, or flip to that mindset, and then be able to unpack what they've said and help them. So questions are really, it's the types of questions. If you're interested in this type of thing, there's a good book out there by Hal Gregerson, Questions Are the Answers. He's got he's got a TED Talk, and then he goes into depth on, we spend too much time focusing on the solutions, right? Just like closed-ended questions can shut down, going straight to solutioning will also shut you down. And so he's got these things called catalytic question bursts, where you spend 15 minutes doing nothing but writing down questions. And then you go through a process to figure out the one that is the catalytic question, the one that really launches the work or additional questions. So again, had to throw in an 80s quote. We thought we had the answers. It was the questions we had wrong. Questions will really help you as a supervisor, team leader, whatever, get to some solutions. And because it is January, and people are setting their goals or their resolutions, another thing that that we work on in coaching, the SMART goals have been out there probably 20 years. We've all been through that methodology and that training, and very valuable. But what we layer on top of that is this thing we call AIM. So together we call it AIM SMART. And I remember when I read this or worked through this, it really made sense for me, because when I would, being a former project manager, I could make a project out of anything, right? I can make a project out of setting goals, and I would define these goals, and I would build schedules about when am I going to achieve these things, and if it was a health related thing, what meals am I going to make, etc. You get uber focused on this, and there is nothing less than perfection is acceptable, right? And then of course we all know what happens. We set the goal too high, or we're too stringent on what is acceptable, and we fail, we give up, it's too hard. AIM SMART is basically, you go through this process, and before you get to the SMART side of it, you say, okay, what is the minimal, what is acceptable, right? So I'm going to start exercising, right? What's acceptable? Most of us will jump to the ideal. I'm going to work out every day. Maybe I work out 6 days, I rest 1 day, let my body recover. 6 days a week, that's it. You build a schedule, and after 3 weeks, you're exhausted, you hate it. Okay, so you start off with what's the acceptable, and it might be I'm gonna sign up for a gym membership. That's first step. Some people are like, well, I'm gonna train for a marathon. Great, okay. There's all kinds of methodologies out there, couch potato to marathon. I've never run a mile in my life. I don't even own shoes. Okay, what's acceptable is week 1, you get some shoes, you get some gear, you identify where you're going to run. You start there. You also identify a middle, right? So if I'm going to exercise 6 days a week, and the acceptable for week 1 is I get signed up, I look at my schedule, figure out when I'm going to go. Right? And then you kind of set this middle, right? Kind of this, okay, maybe I don't do 6, this week I do 2, right? And it seems pretty basic, but when I speak to this audience, and I know there's a lot of program project management folks here who are uber focused on precision. I'm going to build the schedule. This is the scope I have to deliver. This is the budget I have to deliver it in. And nothing less than that go live date of 1/1 next year is acceptable. And that doesn't necessarily say that that's still not the goal, but this gives you a little bit of a ramp to start where, what makes sense, what you have a reasonable chance of achieving to build your way up. And so when you go through this, and I've used it for myself, is after a while you go, okay, what can I recalibrate? Okay, so I've been going at this a month. I've been doing yoga twice a week. Maybe I go 3 times a week, or maybe I take those 2 sessions, instead of doing 20 minutes, I do 25 minutes. And you build up some endurance, and you kind of move through that. So you got the AIM, then you got the SMART, which again we've all been through. You define that, and then the last piece that in every coaching session, every hour-long session, or every conversation, is accountability. And again, the key thing here is you as an employer, or you as a team lead, coach, you are not accountable. And that's one of the traps I fell into early as a coach, is we say, okay, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? Well, I don't know. I mean, could you send me a text twice a week and just see how I'm doing? I'd be like, yeah, right. I'm being a friend. I'm not being a coach. So when I end the coaching session, I say, okay, how are you going to hold yourself accountable, and when? And so the statement here at the bottom is, I aim for goals. I'm smart about achieving them, and I let people know what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. Then when I go back into my next coaching session, the thing we start with is, how'd you do? Right? I'm not paid. This is the difference between the athletic coach. If they achieve it or not, I'm not connected to that. I'm just asking them, how did they do? And did it work? Did the accountability work? Did the goals work? Did the working through the GAILS work, etc.? And we'll start with that. And they'll say, yeah, I did pretty good. Okay, well, then we move on to, okay, what's next, right? Just checking time. Xavier, I assume you want me to leave a couple minutes for questions. I got maybe a couple more slides. Okay. Couple other things, not so much in the coaching space, but things that, as a coach, that I come across that I've been working with my organization on, particularly in the last couple of years, is the stress that everyone is under, and with the arranging for remote work, and there's 10 million open jobs out there in the world, is processing stress. So as a coach, one of the things I look at is, are people managing or coping with stress, or are they processing it? And the idea here is that Now we can define long-term stress as anything that happens for 2 or 3 consecutive days, right? And so when I led this session last year, asked everybody who thinks they've had long-term stress. Before this slide, they'd be like, no, those are like people who like have this, and this, and they tend to quantify stress and trauma. And I'll say, okay, well, who's had stress for 2 to 3 days? Everybody raises their hand, particularly in this. This gets a little bit back to this energy we were talking about. When you're going through stress, your body, your brain is releasing epinephrine, I can't say that word, cortisol. And it ends up, and then all of a sudden you have people who are taking FMLA and things like that because they have chronic fatigue, they have migraines, they have irritable bowel syndrome, or their families are and they're taking care of them. And so one of the things that as a coach we kind of look for is when is someone just managing or coping with stress, and when and there are things out there in coaching, in therapy, in meditation, mindfulness that can help you reset that. I won't be able to drain all of this, but there's some studies out there that if you process it in the right way, right? And the quote here at the bottom is, just because the stress is gone, the stressor is not. And so what people tend to do is, okay, I had that bad day. Okay, I'm gonna go home and binge watch Netflix. I'm good. And what the studies are showing is chemically, you're not good. That continues to course through your body. And if and then what happens is you build up this tolerance, and then all of a sudden you have more and more and more stress, and again, more and more long-term. One of the things in my own coaching, we focus on a little bit is ways to be mindful, ways to, and whether that's introducing meditation or other things, is how do we, kind of reset? And there are studies out there that says you can kind of reset so that you don't just have this cumulative stress cycle. So again, there's a book out there. It's in the sources. I don't think Xavier's going to share this, but there's some books out there by the Nagonski sisters. One last thing, we won't have time to do this either, is as a coach, as a leader of an organization, in particular in these difficult times, I focus on is motivation. And there's a really good study, TED Talk out there by Dan Ariely, and he goes through these examples of what really motivates people. And what, most people think, well, I'm motivated by my paycheck, or I'm motivated by the next promotion cycle. And what I like to say to my team, we had a lot of public victories throughout the year. We got a lot done. We hit this number. We did this. But how many? And I asked people to pause and think, how many private victories you had this year? How many things did you do for the first time successfully, or something? How did you overcome that stakeholder who you thought hated you, and how did you win them over? Those private victories turn out to be more important than the public victories. I won't drain these, but there's some really interesting studies on what motivates people. Is probably the main one here is this. I hate that when that happens. If you remember the old Saturday Night Live skit where the John Lovett and Billy Crystal used to talk about, oh, I hate when I drive a nail through my hand, and then the next person one-ups them. Oh, you think that's bad? And so this one was really interesting, is that they gave people difficult tasks, and then they asked people to price the things that they have done. And the more difficult the task, the more the people assume that their product is worth. And as a supervisor, as a team lead, you have to be aware of these things, as people, associate the payout with the effort that they put into it. And as a supervisor, as a coach, you have to understand a little bit of what they've put into it. Again, flipping it back around on them. How do they see the situation? Not so much, okay, you got that done, thank you. Don't know how much they put into it, but that is a motivating factor. Okay, Xavier, we got about 5 minutes left. I'm gonna pause there. I think I've drained this anyway. Yeah, time for Q&A. You have questions? I don't know if you can open up for others, but I'm here for a few more minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. This has been very informative. I think you've given us quite a bit we can take back and we can use, either with our employees or even as project managers, we can use with our team members as well. So this has been very, very helpful. Now, before I open up, I do have a question from Kenny Green. And her question is, how can we validate without agreeing that they're right? Some see validation as agreement.
You're absolutely right. And this is something when we went through the program that we would wrestle with and talk about on our breaks and things like that. It's a little bit of a slippery slope. And I think it's situation dependent, right? I was a consultant for a long time, so I'm going to say it depends. There will be situations that somebody's going to say something, and it has crossed the line, that it is not, it's not acceptable. And you may have to say, hold on a minute, I can't validate that. And I think you as a team lead, people leader, supervisor, you will kind of know that when that appears. If you're, dealing with more of the vanilla, probably a bad term, but more of the traditional type of things, this person doesn't like me, or I feel like I'm just not getting anywhere at work, those kinds of things, you can validate their frustration and their feelings without saying, if you go to the extreme level, can't stand this person, I'm going to go confront them in the coffee room in the next break. You don't want to validate and go, well, yeah, you have every right to confront them, right? That would be something that crosses the line. So it's a good question, and I think it's just something that requires your experience to know, when you've crossed that line.
All right, thank you so much, Jeff. Are there any other questions? If you have any questions, you can just type your question in the chat really quickly. One person, Shannon Hone, I had to join late, but did you speak about coaching in a remote workforce? And if so, will the session be recorded so that I can get it? We will send the recording afterwards. But do you have any advice around coaching a remote workforce or virtual team?
Yeah, 90% of my coaching, all of my one-on-one coaching is remote. Partially, I've been doing this since I started in 2019, pre-pandemic, but most of my coaching has been during the pandemic, and everything has been remote. I would say the one-on-ones, really, the whole world has gotten very comfortable with this form, and it's fine. In terms of remote coaching for teams, it's like everything else. You have to adapt a little bit, and you have to be careful. You can't always read the room as much as you can when you're coaching a team, when you're in the room and you can see everybody's face. And sometimes you can see everybody's facial expressions depending on the tool you're using. It's doable. I have a lot of friends who coach who are 100% remote, who, they are part of this movement of a younger generation that they don't even have a set location. They're in South Africa doing something, and they coach from there to somebody who's in the States, Europe, etc. It is a very fluid space, the coaching world.
All right, great. Okay, so if there are any other questions, what I'll do is I'll send those questions over to Jeff, and then once I release the recording, we can answer those questions then at that time. But thank you again, Jeff, for joining us. This was very awesome. Great way to start the year. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, come Friday, we will announce the winners of the ELI session. Whoever will have an opportunity to meet with Jeff, I think that would be awesome. And the recording as well as the material will go out Friday as well. And don't forget to come back and join us next month as we talk about change management, as well as going over the new changes with the PMBOK 7. All right. So thank you so much for joining, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thank you. Bye.